Alright, so I was out here the other day and I spliced on these two used battery cables that I found. What I did was I went to the electrical supply and I got some number 4 gauge butt style crimp connectors, and I was going to solder them, but I decided instead to just crimp them. So these are crimped on, and then I actually used this fiberglass and this fiber enforced electrical tape. I would have loved to have heat shrunk some tubing over this, but I didn't have any tubing large enough in diameter to go over this whole thing. I'm going to put some vinyl electrical tape over this now to reinforce it. To crimp it, since number 4 butt style connectors are basically, it was this style connector right here, only it was number 4 gauge. So what I did was I broke the plastic off and essentially used this piece of scrap metal I had here sort of as a makeshift little anvil, and ended up literally using a chisel with a flat end on it and a hammer and punching them down. So they're actually crimped on there pretty darn good and strong. So I think they're going to make a good connection. And then I had picked up some contact clean, some electrical cleaner. So let's talk for a moment about what I wanted to use. What I wanted to use is a product called Deoxit, which is I think it's by a chemical company called RAHN, R-A-H-N, if I'm not mistaken. And that's a really good deoxidizing spray for cleaning connections. It's also good for cleaning potentiometers and things like that. I would have loved to have used that stuff, but I didn't have any of that left. And now you can't buy it. The only place you can buy it is online, and it tends to run $15 or $20 a can, depending on what kind of a deal you can get on shipping. So I didn't want to spend that much on one little can, and B, I didn't want to wait. So I checked all the auto parts stores, and almost every single auto parts store had the same brand and exactly the same type of cleaner, which is an electrical contact cleaner is what they call it, and it leaves a 0 residue. And I actually didn't want that type of a product. That product's really good for cleaning electrical devices where you want it to evaporate and leave no residue, like washing off an electrical connector on an alternator or something like that, which makes sense for automotive use. But I wanted something that actually leaves a kind of a residue that helps actually protect against future corrosion and helps clean up the connection, like Deoxit. Deoxit, if you sprayed it, looks almost like a slightly foamy type product, for lack of a better term. So I went to the big orange box store, and lo and behold, I found this product. Right next to this product was a large can, which was basically another 0 residue electrical cleaner. But this product, it was a small can next to it for $3, and this is the CRC brand 2-26, and it says multi-purpose precision lubricant. So at first glance you might think, well, this makes absolutely no sense. Why on earth would you want a precision lubricant? But if you look below, it actually says plastic safe, improves electrical properties. Now, I don't exactly know what they mean by improves electrical properties, but I think what they're alluding to is that they're saying that it'll improve conductivity in connections. And if you read the instructions on the back, it actually says after you spray this stuff on, they expect you to use it on connectors, because it says make sure the circuit's not energized when you're actually spraying it on. And then it says spray wet surfaces, yada yada yada. But it also talks about that you shouldn't reassemble and use the circuit for at least like 4 to 6 hours. So I think what they're saying is that when you spray this on wet, it may even be slightly conductive, I don't know. But the idea is that if you let it dry, then it's going to leave some sort of a film that should react with the metal and create a better connection. At least that's what we're hoping. So I sprayed the inside of this connector right here with that stuff last night, And I can't see really well down in there if it made much of a difference, but I also sprayed the pins on the motor, and those actually do look cleaner to me. Maybe I'm just, you know, hallucinating, but it sure seems, they seem cleaner. There's a little bit of a shine on these now that wasn't there before, I think. All right, so I just grabbed the battery out of my Ford 1920 tractor, and I'm gonna hook up the power. All right, so now that I get it hooked up, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna check for the always 12 volt. See if that's there. So there we go, 12.5 volts, that looks good. And we got nothing on the white wire yet. I'm gonna turn the key on. All right, so now I just put the key on, and we got 12.45 volts. Yeah, about 5/10 of a, well, no, 12.48. All right, that looks good. I think I might just bump the starter just to see if the starter solenoid's going to work. I don't have any fuel hooked up to it. I don't have the muffs on the thing to send water through the water pump, so I don't want to crank it for any long period of time. The other thing I think I'll do is I'll see whether or not my electric choke is working. All right, that electric choke button on the thing feels really hard to push. I think that's trash, so I might have to replace that at some point. So let's try and crank it. It'll crank. All we need now is fuel and water, and we could try and start this thing for the first time this year. So this is an old one I had. This is actually from the Ugly Boat. Not sure how good this is. These can go bad. They can get dry rotted and cracked. The outside appearance of this one seems okay. The other thing that can go bad on these is the check valve that's built into these bulbs can go bad, cause a problem where when you squeeze it, it wants to push out in both directions, so it doesn't have any pumping action to prime it. This just kind of spins on here. It's a crimp connector. I'm kind of surprised. I'd be surprised if that doesn't leak right there. The hose is pretty stiff, but it actually doesn't look cracked. So in absence of anything else right now, I think I might try this. But I also don't know whether or not, there shouldn't be any debris inside this line because these little check balls are present on both ends. But one of these will click right onto the tank. The other one clicks onto like the Johnson Evinrude style motor, which I've got to put this style on my Mercury here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm hoping I'm going to take this brass fitting out that came with it and find one that's threads in here that gives me a barbed fitting to put the hose onto, or I might have to find a barbed fitting that has a female that will screw onto this. So we'll see. But for starters, I want to take one of these off, and I want to take off the end that goes to the motor. This short end must go to the tank. There's a arrow, directional arrow on here going that way. That shows you that that's the way the fuel should be flowing. So this is definitely the motor side. So I'm going to take this side off, which of course, yeah, that's the crimp style one on there. I'm going to break that off. All right, so I cut the end off that I don't want to use, and this is actually a pretty high, pretty large inside diameter on this tube. So the only barbed nipple that I had that fits this, the only ones I have, all have larger connections on them like this, which isn't going to screw into there. But as luck would have it, I have a coupling. So I'm going to use this on here, screw this into the coupling, screw the coupling onto the fitting that came with this, and screw this all together. So I'm going to put all this together. But when I cut this off, it was just a little bit of remnants of very stale fuel coming out of it. So the inside of this is going to probably have some residue. So what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to go find what I have for prospects for a fuel tank that's in good shape. See if I can't hook this up to it and pump clean fuel through this hose to kind of clean it out a little bit before I put all these fittings on it.
One more way. With the boat?
All right, why don't you go grab that one and we'll check it out, see what we got. All right, so I got a few tanks here. Let's see what we got. At flea markets and other places, when I can grab a metal tank that's in decent shape, I do. The alternative to a metal tank, of course, is the more modern plastic tank. Slide that over here, Ian. This is the modern replacement of the old standby. So depending on how you feel about things, you might decide that this is the better way to go. This is definitely lighter. This is 6.5 gallons. I think these metal ones are over 5. So the problem that I've found with these plastic tanks, and I've had this happen on, I think the last 1 or 2 that I had, was that typically these end up, the plastic gets brittle around some of these fittings and they'll crack and break. For instance, on this one, we've got this, this is supposed to be a fuel level gauge, float, whatever you want to call it. If I can get this out. That barely fits through there. That makes sense, right? Alright, so anyways, this is a float. It's supposed to indicate the fuel level. You can see this is all cracked. And not only does it make this float useless, and you can't really see it, but the other problem that it creates is it allows water to get in. And of course, whoever made this float, they won't allow you to just get this plastic piece and repair this. This is probably not even made to be taken apart. So you pretty much have to, if you can, you try and get this whole float assembly, and if you can't, then the whole tank is pretty much, well, it's not junk, because I mean, you can still use it, you're just not going to know what the fuel level is.
This one right here.
Yeah, that one doesn't have a automatic gauge. Hold on, let's get this one out of the way. Slide that one over here. There's another plastic one. This one doesn't have a fuel gauge. It's just got the cap, and it's got a dipstick on the cap to tell you how much. They call them this a 6 gallon. This even has a little 50-to-1 ratio chart on here to tell you how to pre-mix it. So let's see. How's this one look? Clean? This one's pretty darn clean. Smells of stale gas, but it's actually pretty clean. And the cap's not broken on it. And this fitting doesn't look like it's bad either. So this one's actually pretty promising.
This one's not good.
Not good? What's the matter with it?
The float thing broke. It's
Well, let me
all the way
see.
down there.
Now the problem with the metal tanks is corrosion on the inside. This one actually looks pretty clean. And no, that's actually supposed to be where it is, Aiden. That float sits on the bottom when the tank's empty. As the fuel level rises, that float will float up and it'll move that little metal lever, and it'll actually actuate the fuel level indicator in this little bulb right here, which this is so early. This is actually glass on this one. This is real glass. What's nice about real glass fuel indicators like this is they don't tend to fog up and discolor over time and get hard to read. What's behind it doesn't look so great.
What is it?
Well, it's the little gauge. If you wanted to, you could really take that apart and clean it up really well. Now see all this crud, spider stuff and everything? We don't want that to go back in the tank, so we'll clean that up before we put that in here. This tank, this was a freebie. And pretty much as I suspected, all of these tanks are actually in pretty good shape. Because if they were rusted on the inside, I probably would have thrown them out a long time ago. So,
Why does this one
pick
have
one of
that?
these tanks. What?
That have that.
That's where that connector goes on that thing. This one's got an extra. Oh, that's a different one. That's a different setup.
That one too.
Oh yeah. Huh. I wonder what these are. These must be really old setups here. They've got a third pin, so that's going to keep me from being able to use that, I think.
Oh yeah.
Do you hear the ocean? Yeah, so this is not going to work on here, so we shouldn't even try and put this on
Have
here. So
right there.
these are going to be...
That looks like the same thing.
Well, yeah, but you're not going to be able to click that on there. That's what I'm saying. In other words, you see this, where that little check ball is? That's going to fit over this, and it's not going to, I can tell. This has to go in this hole, which also looks like it's not going to fit. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, that fits. So what these two little pins here do is these little pins go in when you push it on. They probably open little check valves inside here.
What's the bottom one for?
This big bottom one? I don't know. It's not even in the way when you put this on. See the stuff leaking out? That's the stale gas that's in that line.
Let's fill it up.
Well, I haven't decided yet if I want to use that one or if I want to use this plastic one. All right, I had to stop for supper. And before it gets too late today, I'm going to go get some gas so that I can have the premix all ready to go for tomorrow. So this is the other tank that I had. My son went and got it out of the ugly boat. And this is a perfect example of what tends to go wrong on these style plastic tanks, at least in my experience. This tank actually looks pretty good. I totally even forgot about it myself. And then when I turned it over, because it's got water in it, water was leaking out over here, I remembered, oh yeah, I remember what it was. What happens on these tanks, it's not this fitting that breaks, it's the actual threaded part that this screws onto cracks. So interestingly enough, that's this style tank. I've had two of these have this happen. Moeller or something like that. Yeah, M-O-E-L-L-E-R, Moeller Marine Products, Sparta, Tennessee. And you can see what they've got is they've got this separate plastic piece right here. And on, for instance, this tank, on this Tempo tank, which is an older one, what the cap actually threads onto is actually the plastic part of the tank. And that plastic actually seems a little more robust on these than it does on, say, this. I can't get this off right now because it's on there tight, but if I pull this up, I don't know if you can see that or not, but this is completely cracked. Okay, that's completely cracked off. So, see the big hole there? This is cracked. And I don't know why these do that, but it's happened on a couple of them. This has actually got a good fuel level gauge on it, but the problem is that won't fit the other tank. This tank here, it has the bad one. So I'm going to go with this one. This is an Atwood. All right, and fitting looks good on this one, and this doesn't have a cracked part here, and it's got a good vented cap. So I've got my my little container here of my two-stroke oil. I take that with me to the service station, so as I pour in the fuel, I can add a little bit of that at a time. And my two-stroke oil of choice is the Quicksilver Premium two-stroke motor oil. I really think this is good stuff based on a lot of the reviews that I've seen. I don't use that stuff's expensive, so I don't use that on like my chainsaws and my string trimmers and everything, because those are all air-cooled two-strokes. This stuff is specially formulated for outboards, which are water-cooled two-strokes. So off to the gas station. All right, I got 3 gallons of gas in there, so now let's see whether or not this primer bulb works, and also flush out this line. Nope, this is junk. This is blowing into the tank. I can hear it blowing bubbles. Oh, I might be able to still use this primer bulb. I forgot about the trick about using these primer bulbs. There are arrows in the primer bulb that face the outlet, and it's a good idea that when you use one of these primer bulbs to hold it vertically with the arrows pointing skyward, and that helps the check valve actually work inside there. So when I did that, The good news is it started to try and suck fuel up, but what's happening is it's leaking. There's a tiny O-ring inside here. I've had these go bad before, and usually all you got to do to fix them is replace that O-ring, but replacing that O-ring is so difficult that oftentimes you just replace the whole unit, which is a shame. They just make it so hard to get that O-ring out. I've actually used a needle and got a hold of that O-ring and popped it out, and then popped a new O-ring in there and actually gotten these to work again. But I don't have time to mess with that now. So, whoop, see, there's the fuel's coming out. Oh, and I just took my nitrile gloves off so I could avoid getting gas on my hands. Yeah, I didn't mean to sound like a big sissy there, but I just hate gasoline. Once you get it on your skin, it absorbs into your skin so quickly, it makes it difficult to get the gasoline smell off your hands. At least that's my experience. And nothing can get a guy kicked out of his own bedroom quicker than the smell of gasoline. So if I hold the primer bulb vertical with the arrow pointing upward, you can hear it sucking air. It's not sucking air here, it's sucking air right where this hooks onto here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this fitting off. I've got the one that I took off the other end. Let's see if that's any better. Let's try this again. Ah, you can still hear it. At least I think that's where it's sucking air. Yeah, that's definitely where it's sucking air. O-ring inside that thing is shot. Both of them. If I recall correctly, the other problem with this, with fixing these by replacing the O-rings, is it's hard to find that tiny O-ring. Alright guys, I'm back down in the workshop, and let me just show you what goes wrong with these things. Essentially, the biggest problem with these is that there's a O-ring behind this circle right here that's responsible for making a good seal when this is inserted over that little nipple. When you insert this over the nipple, two things happen. The nipple pushes this ball that you can just kind of see inside there. This one looks really rusted. It pushes that ball in against the spring and opens up the flow. And also, at the same time, the O-ring creates a seal. When you take this off of the fuel tank, automatically what happens is that spring pushes the ball back up against the O-ring and creates a seal to keep gas from leaking out of the line when you disconnect it from the tank. That's when all's fine and good. The problem is, well, water in the fuel can cause the ball to become corroded, and also the bigger problem really is the O-rings fail. And I think especially on the earlier ones, you're going to find failing O-rings due to the E10 additive in the fuel. So I took one apart just so you could see what's going on here. This one actually had this plastic piece inserted in here, and what it is it's glued in there or sonically welded, or who knows how they make it, but it's made in a way you can actually just see that disc right there. It's made in a way that you can't take this disc out without pretty much destroying it. So what I've actually done in the past, oh, there you go, fell apart. What I've actually done in the past is I've actually been able to fish out that O-ring very carefully with needles and pop that O-ring out. Getting the old O-ring out is the hardest part. Once you get the old one out and you size a correct sized O-ring, popping the new one in isn't anywhere near as difficult. And once you get an O-ring in there, you save this thing. And these things aren't outrageously expensive, but for what they are, they certainly are. And for the cost of an O-ring, you know, it'd be nice if you could just repair these. In other words, if they made this removable so that you could do this job much easier. So on this one here, I purposely broke this out because I couldn't get the O-ring out, because under magnification I could see that the O-ring is all dry rotted. It's got cracks in it. And also I could see corrosion on the ball. So I knew that this whole unit was bad. So I figured I'd just take it apart just so you could see what I'm looking at here. So what we got is, this is the little cap. And on the other side of the little cap, you can see that O-ring. And then there's the check spring. Then there's this little disc, this little washer, which is supposed to act almost like a seat for the ball. And then there's the ball itself. Now, if I can get the GoPro to focus on something up close, let's see. Here you can see the ball is really rusted on one side. And that makes sense because that one side was probably the side that was exposed to the moisture that caused it to rust. Here, now that I got this disc out, it's a piece of cake to take the O-ring out from the back side. So here's what's left of the O-ring. And I think if I twist it, you'll actually see, depending on how good the resolution is at this close up. For all I know, this is completely out of focus, but trust me, if you could see this well, you'd see that that's all cracked and dry rotted. I wonder if this works through the magnification. This is all deteriorated in here. It's garbage. So I need a new one of those. Well, it's Sunday, and I actually checked and found that my local Kmart had some of these connectors. Now, the thing I don't get about these is that they all look identical, but this one says it's for Yamaha. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I can't use it, maybe it's not going to fit, but it sure looked like a dead ringer for the correct size. So I decided, since it was only $6, to take a chance, because my alternative is I have to wait until Monday when the marina's open, or Walmart. I think Walmart has these too. Walmart has more of an assortment of these different brands. So my question is, why can't you just use this on here? Is the size of this thing different or something? That sure seems to fit on there nicely. I'm gonna put this on and see what happens. Okay, so now, theoretically, if I hold this check ball, primer ball vertical, like I did yesterday, and if it's not able to suck air through the badly leaking fitting there, like it was yesterday, this primer bulb should start working. I think I just answered my own question. I think it's quite possible that the diameter of this pin on a Yamaha is bigger. Bet you that's what it is. Oh yeah, that's what the problem is. Well, that's a bummer. Should have took the old one with me to the store, Mark, and then I could have compared them and looked at them side by side and taken one look and gone, oh, that's not going to work. That's the wrong size. And all they had on the shelf there at the Kmart was the Yamaha ones. They didn't have any of the Mercury or OMC ones. I wonder if any of the pins on any of these other tanks are larger. I bet you they're not. Oh well. Ooh.